Hey Murray, how's it going?
Not bad.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. So yeah, so you and I have known each other for a while and we've worked on some projects together and our careers have taken us in the direction of, more quantifiable, data focused areas of marketing and data science and technology. And so I had this thought the other day. I was wondering what your thoughts on this were. Do you think that companies and marketers should expect to measure ROI on all of their projects and initiatives, or is this something that's more confined to, say, digital marketing and things where you can really measure, clicks and views and things like that? Or should we really say anything that we do from a marketing perspective should have an ROI?
Yeah, I certainly have my own opinion. And I guess it's somewhat biased by data, but I would say generally no for everything. It's definitely not a blanket situation. I think uh, to measure ROI when you have long lengths of time, so things like brand building, like I wouldn't necessarily trust those figures to be super accurate. And um, yeah, and I wouldn't recommend to anybody that especially if you have some marketing budget, to never do brand marketing. That seems a little bit crazy to me. But yeah, what are your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, right? Because branding is probably the one of the first things that comes up in people's minds. Like, well, how am I gonna put a dollar figure to this? And there's certainly ways where you can approximate it or you can relate it to things like sales. I always think about looking at data of things like awareness data and plotting that over maybe sales or sales in new markets and things like that. But what I often try to do with things like that is to say, well, a return on my investment maybe doesn't always necessarily have to be from a financial, a dollars perspective. So as long as, like, if you take something like branding, as long as you're actively measuring where you stand today so that you have benchmarks, then any project that you take on, you can start to measure the effect of that. So let's say you have a benchmark on some sort of scale. You're measuring let's say it's branding, you're running some sort of market research or something like that, and that market research comes back, and each quarter or whatnot, you're seeing that your brand awareness is at this level, and then you launch a marketing branding initiative, and then you check back in a quarter back to that same analysis that you're running and say, oh, look at that, it actually went up by 20% or something like that. And will it always be clear cut? No, but you can start to approximate things and say, look, this project, actually the return on our investment was an increase in brand awareness of X%.
Yeah, to me, that's not ROI. That's more metric-driven marketing. Uh, when it comes to ROI, I tend to think hard cash. You put out money, you get money back, and that's an investment. It drives me a little bit crazy when somebody says, like, I'm investing in a more comfortable chair for work so that I can be more productive. And it's just like, I don't know if that's an investment, until you measure your productivity and whether it makes a difference and everything. But
But then, sorry, but even there, couldn't you technically, if you did that analysis and your productivity would be measured, you could technically down the road get it close to or get it to a dollar amount somehow?
you could approximate it and everything like this, but like this also drives me a little bit crazy. Like when I talk to somebody about brand building and their ROI is like, if their target market is men, 24 to 44, it's like, how many did we reach for, our dollar of spend or something like this? And like, I think it's definitely good to try and have something to approximate or quantify, but like, at a certain point, I start to question whether you can call it an investment or whether it's more of a, well, at a certain point, I think it almost becomes a religion because it's just pure faith. But, but yeah, to me, I think, yeah, to me, I differentiate those. One's about driving revenue and, seeing how that affects your bottom and top line. And the other is about um, yes, I don't know, I almost think it's like faith again, like you're hoping it drives revenue at some point. I mean, you can use like econometrics, but and some of these kinds of marketing mix modeling, but some of them they're just so tenuous. You need so much data. You need loads of assumptions. You change some assumption, you change some setting, you can get really different results. Um, um,
You're
yeah,
talking about you're talking about actually putting dollars to different
yeah, like
types of results. Hmm.
yeah, like if you advertise like if you advertise like there was some example of like Ford advertising to like 7-year-olds with Transformer movies or something, because they said, oh yes, well they it's good to expose them to the brand now, because in 18 years or whatever they'll be out going for their first car, and then they're going to remember that Transformers movie and how cool that car was. And yeah, maybe you can model that. But like, the delay in that, the error, the assumptions, I don't know.
Yeah.
I kind of wonder if there's even a point in trying to measure those things, other than like, well, the business has faith. There's some kind of logical connection that a human will make, and we're just going to try and reach as many 7-year-olds as we can with our cool car movie, rather than worrying about, did that cool car movie drive revenue um, 20 years from now or 18 years from now.
But
Yeah.
do you give up on any kind of, so using this example, which sounds really cool, what do you give up on any kind of measurement then, or how do
Uh,
you judge whether that's been successful?
yeah, I think it depends on like how you're. I'm not the best brand marketer, as a side note, because I'm definitely spent a lot more time in the kind of direct marketing and the like online marketing. But to me, it's more about these kinds of things. Like, you have your hypothesis that 7-year-olds will buy cars in 18 years, and that if they see a cool car, they'll think it's cool. And then you say things like, okay, how many 7-year-olds were I able to reach? Were they in markets where they're possibly going to have a car? Because a lot of 7-year-olds with rich parents end up being 20-something-year-olds, who are fairly well off. So maybe you want to hit that demographic more. But again, you're having some theory or some steps there, and just kind of going with that. Yeah, I don't know. Do you think we should be trying to quantify, or like brand marketing even? Or
I think we should be trying to quantify a lot more than we do today. I think a ton of marketing is still seen as, okay, well, we did this, right? And that looks cool, or, I saw it on social media, because maybe I'm part of the follower base, but I'm not the target. So actually, we haven't determined whether that's been successful. So I think as companies and as marketers, we can stand to be a little bit more rigorous. I think even we're talking, it's great we're talking about those branding examples, because those are the ones that, again, are often perceived as just like, well, let's hope that, that's done something. But for the longest time, even like the more traditional mediums like TV and radio and even out of home, there's been measurement around those, right? So I think it's that consistency. So and maybe it's, for me, it's always back to the benchmarks. So we shouldn't wait until we actually put something like that out. We should already kind of have a read on it. So in your Ford example, that company probably cares about impacting people prior to their driving age period, right? So where do they stand today, again, with that group, and how have they moved the needle with that latest effort with that movie, for example, right? So um, yeah, I think that the rigor that digital marketing has brought to the whole marketing world can definitely be used more with other things. Not to mention the way that technology now is infused in so many things. Like, you look at radio, right? And now the way that internet radio works, and the way that we could certainly track and measure things through that. It's no longer just, well, you're broadcasting and you're not really sure. You have a control group or whatnot of who's picking it up. Now you actually can get very specific. So it's just about kind of challenging yourself every time that you've got a project to be like, okay, what are the numbers going to be? Because they could be anything. Again, it doesn't have to be dollars, but what are the numbers we're trying to affect, the KPIs? Where are we today? And then what are they going to be, or what are we looking for them to be once the project is over?
yeah, I guess for me, I would, if I was to, I think it really depends on your budget and the size of your company as well, because like for small companies or smaller companies, I would just try and avoid a lot of the unmeasurable or the difficult to measure channels. and stick with kind of the more digital ones. But even like digital channels, there's just so much, the attribution is just so difficult. So I kind of think that you should probably, if you're smaller, on the smaller side, focus on trying to measure that better, or make sure you have everything set up correctly to try and measure it. And then, yeah, just avoid channels where you can't really measure it. And if you're on the bigger side, I would say you should definitely make sure that your more measurable channels are set up correctly before I would worry about measuring the less measurable channels. But again, these are usually people in different teams, right? Which is also a kind of a crazy thing to me. Like, the brand and the performance marketers shall not chat to each other. I don't know if it's like that where you are, but I've just seen that all over the place.
No, I've been fortunate, but yeah, that's for sure. There shouldn't be those kind of silos. But maybe that's, again, is that growing pains? Because if you think about it, the more digital side of things hasn't been around that long, right? There's a lot of people who saw that come up during their careers, right? And so now we're kind of trying to make it all work together. Maybe in the future that divide won't be as pronounced.
Yeah, I don't know. I've been talking to people about this, and it's really interesting to me in that a lot of marketing ends up being like story, and then how much marketers like to kind of live in story, because I almost think that you have totally different kinds of people. There's just like people are into numbers and in the one side, in the more performance side, and then people who are into story on the brand side. And I think there's even a communication issue there, and yeah, I've definitely seen some organizations where there's animosity between the two, because the performance side expects the brand side, or the less measurable side, maybe let's call them, because it's not just brand, but the less measurable channels to be measurable. And the less measurable channels tend to be more about story and creative. And they kind of push back on this and say, well, no, it's not just about measuring your impact. It's also about creating brand and awareness, and good feelings with the customer. Yeah.
That's the thing, though. I think people shy away from numbers because at first, a lot of this is very prevalent in marketing. We're kind of like, oh, well, I'm not good at this. This is numbers. But like, it's actually not that. It's not that hard. You can take a lot of things and apply, that measurement to them, and then I would hope that that's changing from those traditional areas that are more so about, like, but again, even you go back to things like awareness, right? That can be measured. Purchase intent can be measured. All these things. So
I just kind of want. Sorry. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, like, for me, I don't think it's just number phobia. It's things like, just sorting out attribution. Okay, somebody came in from LinkedIn, but they 3 days prior, they also came in on a Google search, but then they came in through a Facebook ad. And then LinkedIn again. So is it LinkedIn because it was last? Is it LinkedIn because it was most often? Was it Google because it was first? Was it Facebook because they had like there was a delay and they left, and so you end up with these really thorny questions that don't have great answers. Yeah, and then. Yeah.
But it seems like in a lot of industries and for a lot of companies, a lot of that stuff can be like aggregated or approximated. So, okay, we take something like fast moving consumer goods versus real estate or something like that. The purchase sort of journey looks a lot different for both of those, and no two people are the same, but it could sort of be averaged out to say the average person buying a pair of shoes does this many internet searches before they go and watch videos on YouTube about it before they purchase or something like that, right? And then extrapolate that to the different another product or another area. So I think as long as you can agree to how valuable those channels are, and not, again, as long as internally you can come up with a model that you agree on and everybody's okay, yes, we're aligned to this, and then of course, like, and maybe this is the problem. People don't want to be held to something and later, like, these things need to be flexible, but we have to agree on a little bit of a model or rules. So because attribution is, it's a wonderful thing, but it's also never going to be 100% or the same across every single company or every single buying journey.
Yeah, but yeah, so sometimes I wonder how much this agreement is just buying into the story, just as you buy into the story that 7-year-olds who see Transformers that happen to be Ford cars will 18 years later buy a Ford. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, that's not an attribution model I'd want to touch with a 10-foot pole, because I don't know how you'd. But in the
you
future,
wait.
but our technological overlords will soon learn to figure out how to dissect our minds for how we've made these purchase decisions. So don't worry.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I feel like I'm a little softer on the numbers side of thing, because like I've had to do things like when building recommendation engines, trying to attribute a sale to the recommendation engine or not, and in those situations you have loads of data. You know who you recommended to, what you recommended, what they were looking like, what they bought, what they added to cart, and all these kinds of things. And it was never clear cut that like the recommendation engine did this, or in most cases.
Mhm.
So and then when you add in all this complexity of like ad channels, you only have partial visibility, these things. To me, a lot of it, well, I shouldn't say a lot. There's a portion of faith with any measurement, and it and of course, when you get like off-platform or like non-digital advertising, you have to rely more on the faith. It's not to say you shouldn't have any kind of numbers, but you just have your hypothesis, and you try and maximize or optimize that hypothesis. But again, then you also kind of tailor that around your budget. But
Mhm.
yeah, because like again, if I didn't have much budget, I definitely stick with the more measurable side of things. And if I was Coca-Cola and or Red Bull, I can just throw money at advertising. Yeah, then I definitely do a lot of brand building, I think.
But I think even those guys, they care a lot about their mind share and things like that, which they measure.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I don't know. Like I've seen like I just remember there was a beer survey where they surveyed beer buyers about their preferences and everything, and they identified like 6 key groups and da da da. And then we went into the transaction data, and none of these groups existed. Yeah, and like I was talking to somebody after, and they said, if you start off with a survey and then try to match it to transaction data, you'll never find a link. If you
Mm,
start off with the transaction data and then try and enrich it with survey data, all of a sudden these clusters just happen to exist. And I think it's just I kind of question a lot of the surveys out there. I'm sure there's lots of ones that are kind of very accurate and dead on and done right, but I think a lot of it is also um, storytelling with better numbers.
mm. Well, definitely in the end, it's going to be foot traffic, or it's going to be dollars or clicks or something. Like, the numbers will bear out the truth, right?
Yeah, but I think again, it's your hypothesis. Like, once upon a time, Facebook likes were the key avenue to success,
Mm,
and then people started questioning that, and then somebody actually was built some tests and some numbers, and um, maybe those numbers didn't actually fully align, but it just kind of really cast a lot of doubt on the hypothesis and suggested you should go another way. And then there's always the super fun thing of for some channels like billboards, you can just not advertise for 6 months and see what happens.
mm.
A lot of companies find that really scary because nobody wants to be the guy that finds out that billboards were super important and you've just cratered our sales. But
Well, on the flip
yeah,
side, they're expensive, right? And so, is this really worth it, right? And
well, I've just seen like even in A/B testing things like removal of paper flyers.
mhm.
People don't want to be if there's already a story about how important they are, nobody wants to prove or disprove this story, because if it turns out you made the wrong choice, um, yeah.
Right. Right. And so those, again, so that tracking the KPIs could actually be scary or threaten certain setups or things. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank goodness we have the ability, and more like these with channels and cross channels, we're able to check on these things. So hopefully it's just, we get like the Facebook example you gave is great. As we go, we also learn which things, because that's a trap too, right? Some things like, oh, this is so quantifiable and I've got these numbers and, engagement rates. But,
Yeah, you got to make your numbers go up and to the right, no matter which numbers they are.
you got it. You got it. Well, thanks, Murray. That was awesome. So hopefully we can chat again with some of these crazy marketing topics.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Adam.
Take care.
You too. Bye.